Ilyas Venn didn't begin this out of fear. He began it out of curiosity, the kind that pretends to be harmless until it starts changing the air around you. He wanted to prove that the mind never truly stops speaking, that beneath silence there is always noise waiting to be recorded. So he chose 12 hours. No breaks, no edits, no hesitation. Just a pen, paper, and every thought he could catch before it slipped away. At first, it was ordinary thoughts about time, about the chair creaking, about how strange it felt to observe himself thinking. But even in those early minutes, something felt slightly misaligned, like the rhythm of his thoughts didn't entirely belong to him. By the third hour, the experiment stopped feeling like observation and started feeling like participation. Ilyas noticed sentences forming that he didn't remember deciding to write. The pen moved with a steadier confidence than his own mind. Thoughts appeared that felt placed rather than produced, as if something else had learned how to interrupt him perfectly between his own ideas. There was a growing sense that the notebook wasn't just receiving information, it was organizing it. And in between his normal reflections, something unfamiliar began slipping through, quiet, precise statements that seemed to understand him more than he understood himself. As the hours stretched forward, the silence in the room began to feel heavier, less empty. Ilyas found himself noticing the spaces between sounds more than the sounds themselves. Even his breathing seemed too deliberate, too noticeable, as if it had become part of the experiment as well. The writing continued without resistance, but now it carried an unsettling consistency, as if hesitation had been removed from the process entirely. Occasionally, he would pause just long enough to wonder why stopping felt more difficult than continuing. And in those pauses, the pages seemed to wait for him, patient, expectant, unchanged by doubt. Somewhere past the halfway point, the writing stopped belonging to the present entirely. It began describing places Ilyas had never seen but could somehow picture too clearly. Hallways that stretched longer than they should. Doors that felt slightly misaligned with reality. Details appeared with disturbing clarity, as if they had been lived rather than imagined. He tried to correct it, to steer the writing back toward familiar ground, but the notebook refused to drift back with him. Instead, it continued forward, deeper into descriptions that felt like memories without origin. And the most disturbing part was not the content itself, but how naturally his mind accepted it as if it had always been there. By hour 8, resistance was no longer an option Ilyas could clearly define. His control over the pen felt thinner, as though it had become a suggestion rather than a command. The writing no longer paused when he paused. It continued through hesitation, through doubt, through his attempts to interrupt it. The sentences became sharper, more aware of his attempts to reclaim authorship. There was no anger in them, only certainty. A calm insistence that something had already been established long before he began paying attention. And in that realization, Ilyas began to feel less like the writer and more like the surface being written upon. Time began to lose structure. Minutes no longer felt measurable, only endured. The clock in the room became less of a reference and more of an object that existed independently of time itself. Ilyas struggled to hold on to his own thoughts, but even they felt increasingly fragmented, as if they were being gently taken apart before completion. The notebook filled itself with uninterrupted flow, no longer requiring correction or pause. There was a strange calm in the process, almost reassuring in its completeness. Yet beneath that calm was the quiet realization that nothing in the room needed him to continue anymore for the process to persist. When the 12 hours ended, there was no clear sense of completion, only cessation. The writing stopped not like something finishing, but like something deciding it no longer needed continuation. The final pages were filled neatly, deliberately, with a message that did not feel written in response to anything he had done. It simply was there, as if waiting for the moment he would understand it. The room felt unchanged, yet emptied of something difficult to name. And what remained most unsettling was not what had been written, but the realization that nothing in the notebook suggested the experiment had ever been about recording thoughts at all.